Everyday Use by Alice Walker. I will wait for her in the yard that Maggie and I made so clean and wavy yesterday afternoon. A yard like this is more comfortable than most people know. It is not just a yard, it is like an extended living room. When the hard clay is the swept clean as a floor and the fine sand around the edges lined with the tiny irregular grooves, anyone can come and sit and look up into the elm tree and wait for the breezes that never come inside the house. Maggie will be nervous until after her sister goes. She will stand hopelessly inconsolable, homely and ashamed of the burnish cast down her arms and legs, eyeing her sister with a mixture of envy and awe. She thinks that her sister has held life always in the palm of one hand. That no is a word the world never learned to say to her. You have no doubt seen those TV shows where the child who has made it is confronted as a surprise by her own mother and father tottering in weakly from backstage. A pleasant surprise, of course. What would they do if parent and child came on the show only to curse out and insult each other? On TV, the mother and child embrace and smile into each other's faces. Sometimes the mother and the father weep. The child wraps them in her arms and leans across the table to tell how she would not have made it without their help. I have seen these programs. Sometimes I dream a dream in which Dee and I are suddenly brought together on a TV program of this sort. Out of a dark and soft-seated limousine, I am ushered into a bright room filled with many people. There I meet a smiling, grey, sporty man like the Johnny Carson who shakes my hand and tells me what a fine girl I have. Then we are on the stage and Dee is embracing me with tears in her eyes. She pins on my dress a large orchid, even though she has told me once that she thinks the orchids are tacky flowers. In real life, I am a large, big-boned woman with rough maned working hands. In the winter, I wear flannel nightgowns to bed and overalls during the day. I can kill and clean a hog as mercilessly as a man. My fat keeps me hot in zero weather. I can work outside all day, breaking ice to get water for washing. I can eat pork liver cooked over the open fire minutes after it comes steaming from the hog. One winter I knocked a bull calf straight in the brain between the eyes with a sledgehammer and had the meat hung up to chill before nightfall. But of course all this does not show on television. I am the way my daughter would want me to be, 100 pounds lighter, my skin like an uncooked barley pancake, my hair glistens in the hot bright lights. Johnny Carson has much to do to keep up with the quick and witty tongue. But that is a mistake. I know even before I wake up. Whoever knew a Johnson with a quick tongue who can even imagine me looking a strange white man in the eye? It seems to me I have talked to them always with one foot raised in flight, with my head fumed in whichever way is farthest from them. D, though, she would always look anyone in the eye. Hesitation was no part of her nature. "How do I look, Mama?" Maggie says, showing just enough of her thin body enveloped in pink skirt and a red blouse for me to know she is there, almost hidden by the door. "Come out into the yard," I say. "Have you ever seen a lame animal, perhaps a dog, run over by some careless person rich enough to own a car? Sidle up to someone who is ignorant enough to be kind to him." That is the way my Maggie walks. She has been like this, chin on chest, eyes on ground, feet in shuffle, ever since the fire that burned the other house to the ground. D is the lighter than Maggie, with the nicer hair and a fuller figure. She is a woman now, though sometimes I forget how long ago was it that the other house burned. 10, 12 years. Sometimes I can still hear the flames and feel Maggie's arms sticking to me, her hair smoking and her dress falling off her in the little black papery flakes. Her eyes seemed stretched open, blazed opened by the flames that reflected in them, and I see her standing off under the sweet gum tree she used to dig gum out of, a look of concentration on her face as she watched the last dingy grey board of the house fall in toward the red-hot brick chimney. "Why don't you do a dance around the ashes?" I'd wanted to ask her. She had hated the house that much. I used to think she hated Maggie too, but that was before we raised the money, the church and me, to send her to Augusta to school. She used to read to us without pity, forcing words, lies, the other folks, the habits, the whole lives upon us too, sitting trapped and ignorant underneath her voice. She watched us in a river of make-believe, burned us with a lot of knowledge we didn't necessarily need to know, praised us to her with the serious way she read, to show us a way at just the moment, like dimwits we seemed about to understand. Dee wanted nice things, a yellow organdy dress to wear to her graduation from high school, black pumps to match a green suit she'd made from an old suit somebody gave me. She was determined to stare down any disaster in her efforts. Her eyelids would not flicker for minutes at a time. Often I fought off the temptation to shake her. At 16, she had a style of her own and knew what style was. I never had an education myself. After second grade, the school was closed down. Don't ask me why. In 1927, Khaled asked the fewer questions than they do now. Sometimes the Maggie reads to me. She stumbles along, good naturedly, but can't see well. She knows that she is not bright, like the good looks and money. Quickness passes her by. She will marry John Thomas, who has the mossy teeth in an earnest face, and then I will be free to sit here and I guess just sing church songs to myself. Although I never was a good singer, never could carry a tune, I was always better at a man's job. I used to love to milk till I was hooked in the side in 49. Cows are soothing and slow and don't bother you unless you try to milk them the wrong way. I have deliberately turned my back on the house. It is the 3 rooms, just like the one that burned, except the roof is tin. They don't make shingle roofs anymore. There are no real windows, just some the holes cut in the sides, like the portholes in a ship, but not round and not square, with the rawhide holding the shutters up on the outside. This house is in a pasture too, like the other one. No doubt when Dee sees it, she will want to tear it down. She wrote me once that no matter where we choose to live, she will manage to come see us. But she will never bring her friends. Maggie and I thought about this, and Maggie asked me, Mama, when did Dee ever have any friends? She had a few furtive boys in pink shirts hanging about on wash day after school. Nervous girls who never laughed. Impressed with her, they worshipped the well-turned phrase, the cute shape, the scolding humor that erupted like the bubbles in Leigh. She read to them. When she was courting Jimmy T, she didn't have much time to pay to us, but turned all her fault-finding power on him. He flew to marry a cheap city girl from a family of ignorant, flashy people. She hardly had time to recompose herself. When she comes, I will meet, but there they are. Maggie attempts to make a dash for the house in her shuffling way, but I stay her with my hand. Come back here, I say, and she stops and tries to dig a well in the sand with her toe. It is hard to see them clearly through the strong sun, but even the first glimpse of a leg out of the car tells me it is Dee. Her feet were always the neat looking, as if God Himself had shaped them with a certain style. From the other side of the car comes a short, stocky man. Hair is all over his head, a foot long and hanging from his chin like a kinky mule tail. I hear Maggie the suck in her breath. Oh, is the what it sounds like when you see the wriggling end of a snake just in front of your foot on the road. Oh. D next. Dressed down to the ground in this the hot weather. Dressed so loud it hurts my eyes. There are yellows and oranges enough to throw back the light of the sun. I feel my whole face warming from the heat waves it throws out. Earrings to gold and hanging down to her shoulders. Bracelets dangling and making noises when she moves her arm up to shake the folds of the dress out of her armpits. The dress is loose and flows, and as she walks closer, I like it. I hear Maggie go, oh, again. It is her sister's hair. It stands straight up like the wool on a sheep. It is black as night, and around the edges are two long pigtails that wrapped about like small lizards disappearing behind her ears. Wazuzo Tiano, she says, coming on in that gliding way. The dress makes her move. The short, stocky fellow with the hair to his navel is old, grinning, and he follows up with the Assalamu alaikum, my mother and sister. He moves to hug Maggie, but she falls back right up against the back of my chair. I feel her trembling there, and when I look up, I see the perspiration falling off her chin. Don't get wet. Don't get up, says D. Since I'm stout, it takes the something of a push. You can see me trying to move a second or two before I make it. She turns, showing white heels through her sandals, and goes back to the car. Out she peeks the next with a Polaroid. She stoops down quickly and lines up the picture after picture of me sitting there in front of the house with Maggie covering behind me. She never takes a shot without making sure the house is included. When a cow comes nibbling around the edge of the yard, she snaps it, and me and Maggie and the house. Then she puts the Polaroid in the back seat of the car and comes up and kisses me on the forehead. Meanwhile, Assalamu alaikum is going through motions with Maggie's hand. Maggie's hand is as limp as a fish, and probably as the cold despite the sweat, and she keeps trying to pull it back. It looks like Assalamu alaikum that wants to shake hands but wants to do it fancy, or maybe he don't know how the people they shake hands. Anyhow, he soon gives on the Maggie. Well, I say D. No, Mama, she says, not D. Wangaro, Lee, Vanika, Kimanjo. What happened today? I wanted to know. She's dead, Wangaro said. I couldn't bear it any longer being named after the people who oppress me. You know as well as me, you was named after your aunt Dizzy. I said Dizzy is my sister. She named D. We called her Big D after D was born. But who was she named after? Asked Wangaro. I guess after Grandma D, I said. And who was she named after? Asked Wangaro. Her mother, I said, and so Wangaro was getting tired. That is about as far back as I can trace it, I said, though in fact I probably could have carried it back beyond the Civil War through the branches. Well, said Assalamu alaikum. There you are. I heard Maggie say. There I was not, I said before. Dizzy cropped up in our family, so why should I try to trace it that far back? He just stood there grinning, looking down on me like somebody inspecting a model, a car. Everyone's in a while he and Wangaro sent eye signals over my head. How do you pronounce this name? I asked. You don't have to call me by it if you don't want to, said Wangaro. Why shouldn't I? I asked. If that is what you want us to call you, we will call you. I know it might sound awkward at first, said Wangaro. I will get used to it, I said. Ram it out again. Well, soon we got the name out of the way. Assalamu alaikum had a name twice as long and 3 times as hard. After I tripped over it 2 or 3 times, he told me to just call him Hakim Baba. I wanted to ask him was he a barber, but I didn't really think he was, so I didn't ask. You must belong to those the beef, the cattle peoples that down the road, I said. They said Assalamu alaikum when they met you too, but they didn't shake hands, always too busy, feeding the cattle, fixing the fences, putting up the salt lick shelters, throwing down hay. When the white folks poisoned some of the herd, the men stayed up all night with rifles in their hands. I walked a mile and a half just to see the sight. Hakim Baba said, I accept some of their doctrines, but farming and raising the cattle is not my style. They didn't tell me, and I didn't ask whether Wangaro D had really gone and married him. We sat down to eat, and right away he said he didn't eat collards and the pork was unclean. Wangaroo, though, went on through the chitlins and the cornbread, the greens, and everything else. She talked a blue streak over the sweet potatoes. Everything delighted her, even the fact that we still used the benches her daddy made for the table when we couldn't afford to buy chairs. Oh, Mama, she cried. Then they turned to Hakima Baba. I never knew how lovely these benches are. You can feel the thumbprints, she said, running her hands underneath her and along the bench. Then she gave a sigh and her hand closed over Grandma Dee's butter dish. That is it, she said. I knew there was something I wanted to ask you if I could have. She jumped up from the table and went over in the corner where the churn stood. The milk in it crabbed by now. She looked at the churn and looked at it. This the churn top is what I need, she said. Didn't Uncle Bardi whittle it out of a tree you all used to have? Yes, I said. She said happily. And I want the dasher too. Uncle Bardi whittled that too? Asked the Baba. The Wangaroo looked up at me. Aren't these the first husband? Whittled the dash, said Maggie so low you almost couldn't hear her. His name was Henry, but they called him Stash. Maggie's the brain is like an elephant's, Wangaroo said, laughing. I can use the jute top as a centerpiece for the alcove table, she said, sliding a plate over the jute. And I will think of something artistic to do with the dasher. When she finished wrapping the dasher, the handle stuck out. I took it for a moment in my hand, so you didn't even have to look close to see whether the way the hands the pushing the dasher up and down to make the butter had left a kind of a sink in the wood. In fact, there were a lot of small sinks that you could see where thumbs and fingers had sunk into the wood. It was beautiful light yellow wood from a tree that grew in the yard where the Big D and Stash had lived. After dinner, the Wangaroo went to the trunk at the foot of my bed and started riffling through it. Maggie hung back in the kitchen over the dishpan. Out came the Wangaroo with the two quills. They had been pieced by Grandma D, and then Big D and me had hung them on the quilt frames on the front porch and quilted them. One was in the lawn stacked pattern. The other was the walk around the mountain. In both of them were scraps of dresses Grandma D had worn the 50 and more years ago. Bits and pieces of grandma jackets, paisley shirts, and one teeny faded blue piece about the size of a penny matchbox. That was from the great grandpa Israel's uniform that he wore in the Civil War. Mama, Wangaroo said, sweet as a bird, can I have these old quills? I heard something to fall in the kitchen, and a minute later the kitchen door slammed. Why don't you take one or two of the others? I asked. These all things was just done by me and Big D from some tops that your grandma pieced before she died. No, said Wangaroo, I don't want those. They are stitched around the borders by machine. That will make them last better, I said. That is not the point, said Wangaroo. These are all pieces of dresses Grandma used to wear. She did all this stitching by hand. Imagine she held the quills securely in her arms, stroking them. Some of the pieces, like those lavender ones, come from the old clothes her mother handed down to her. I said, moving up to touch the quills. The Wangaroo moved back just enough so that I couldn't reach the quills. They already belonged to her. Imagine, she breathed again, clutching them closely to her bosom. The truth is, I said, I promised to give them quills to Maggie for when she marries the John Thomas. She gasped like a bee had stung her. Maggie can't appreciate these quills, she said. She would probably be backward enough to put them to everyday use. I reckon she would, I said. God knows I've been saving them for long enough with nobody using them. I hope she will. I didn't want to bring up how I had offered the Wangaroo a quilt when she went away to college. Then she had told they were old-fashioned, out of style. But they are priceless, she was saying now, furiously, for she has temper. Maggie would put them on the bed, and in 5 years they would be in rags less than that. She can always make some more, I said. Maggie knows how to quilt. The Wangaroo looked at me with hatred. You just will not understand. The point is, they are quills, these quills. Well, I said, stumped. What would you do with them? Hang them, she said, as if that was the only thing you could do with quills. Maggie by now was standing in the door. I could almost hear the sound her feet made as they scraped over each other. She can have them, Mama, she said, like somebody used to never winning anything or having anything reserved for her. I can remember Grandma D without the quills. I looked at her hard. She had filled her bottom lip with checkerberry snuff and gave her face a kind of dope hang dog look. It was Grandmarty and Big D who taught her how to quilt herself. She stood there with her scared hands hidden in the folds of her skirt. She looked at her sister with something like the fear, but she wasn't mad at her. This was Maggie's portion. This was the way she knew God to work. When I looked at her like that, something hit me in the top of my head and ran down to the soles of my feet. Just like when I am in church and the Spirit of God touches me and I get happy and shout. I did something I never done before, hugged Maggie to me, then dragged her on into the room, snatched the quills out of Miss Vandero's hand and dumped them into Maggie's lap. Maggie just sat there on my bed with her mouth open. Take one or two of the others, I said to Dee. But she turned without a word and went out to Hakim Ababa. You just don't understand, she said as Maggie and I came out to the car. What don't I understand? I wanted to know. Your heritage, she said, and then she turned to Maggie, kissed her, and said, you ought to try to make something of yourself too, Maggie. It is really a new day for you, but from the way you and Mama still live, you would never know it. She put on some sunglasses that hid everything above the tip of her nose and chin. Maggie smiled, maybe at the sunglasses, but really smiled, not scared. After we watched the car dust settle, I asked Maggie to bring me a dip of snuff, and then the two of us sat there just enjoying until it was the time to go in the house and go to bed.